Good day everyone. Today we shall have another law of leadership by John C. Maxwell, the fourth law, the law of navigation. If you want to be a leader, make sure that you watch all the 21 videos on the law of leadership. Followers need leaders who are able to effectively navigate for them. When they're facing life and death situations, that necessity becomes painfully obvious. At other times, even though the consequences are not as serious, the need is just as great. The truth is that just about anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. That is the law of navigation. Navigators see the trip ahead. General Electric Chairman Jack Welch asserts that a good leader remains focused. Controlling your direction is better than being controlled by it. Welch is right, but leaders who navigate do even more than control the direction in which they and their people travel. They see the whole trip in their minds before they leave the dock. They have a vision for their destination, they understand what it will take to get there, they know who they'll need on the team to be successful, and they recognize the obstacles long before they appear on the horizon. Leroy Eims, author of Be the Leader You Were Meant to Be, writes, "A leader is one who sees more than others see, who sees farther than others see, and who sees before others do." The larger the organization, the more clearly the leader has to be able to see ahead. That's true because sheer size makes mid-course corrections more difficult. And if there are errors, many more people are affected than when you're traveling alone or with only a few people. The disaster shown in the recent film Titanic was a good example of that kind of problem. The crew could not see far enough ahead to avoid the iceberg altogether, and they could not maneuver enough to change course once it was spotted because of the size of the ship, the largest built at that time. The result was that it cost more than 1,000 people their lives. Where the leader goes, first-rate navigators always have in mind that other people are depending on them and their ability to chart a good course. I read an observation by James A. Autry in Life and Work, A Manager's Search for Meaning that illustrates this idea. He said that occasionally you hear about the crash of 4 military planes flying together in a formation. The reason for the loss of all 4 is this: when jet fighters fly in groups of 4, one pilot, the leader, designates where the team will fly. The other 3 planes fly on the leader's wing, watching him and following him wherever he goes. Whatever moves he makes, the rest of his team will make along with him. That's true whether he soars in the clouds or smashes into a mountaintop. Before leaders take their people on a journey, they go through a process in order to give the trip the best chance of being a success. Navigators draw on past experience. Every past success and failure can be a source of information and wisdom if you allow it to be. Successes teach you about yourself and what you're capable of doing with your particular gifts and talents. Failures show what kinds of wrong assumptions you've made and where your methods are flawed. If you fail to learn from your mistakes, you're going to fail again and again. That's why effective navigators start with experience. But they certainly don't end there. Navigators listen to what others have to say. No matter how much you learn from the past, it will never tell you all you need to know for the present. That's why top-notch navigators gather information from many sources. They get ideas from members of their leadership team. They talk to the people in their organization to find out what's happening on the grassroots level. And they spend time with leaders from outside the organization who can mentor them. Navigators examine the conditions before making commitments. I like action, and my personality prompts me to be spontaneous. On top of that, I have reliable intuition when it comes to leadership. But I'm also conscious of my responsibilities as a leader. So before I make commitments that are going to impact my people, I take stock and thoroughly think things through. Good navigators count the cost before making commitments for themselves and others. Navigators make sure their conclusions represent both faith and fact. Being able to navigate for others requires a leader to possess a people all the way. If you can't confidently make the trip in your mind, you're not going to be able to take it in real life. On the other hand, you also have to be able to see the facts realistically. You can't minimize obstacles or rationalize your challenges. If you don't go in with your eyes wide open, you're going to get blindsided. As Bill Easum observes, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision. Sometimes it's difficult balancing optimism and realism, intuition and planning, faith and fact. But that's what it takes to be effective as a navigating leader. A lesson in navigation. I remember the first time I really understood the importance of the law of navigation. I was 28 years old, and I was leading Faith Memorial in Lancaster, Ohio, my second church. Before my arrival there in 1972, the church had experienced a decade-long plateau in its growth. But by 1975, our attendance had gone from 400 to more than 1,000. I knew we could keep growing and reach more people, but only if we built a new auditorium. The good news was that I already had some experience in building and relocation because I had taken my first church through the process. The bad news was that the first one was really small in comparison to the second one. To give you an idea of the difference, the changing room in the nursery in Lancaster was going to be larger than the whole sanctuary in the original building of my first church. It was going to be a multi-million-dollar project, more than 20 times larger than my first one. But even that was not the greatest obstacle. Right before I came on board at Faith Memorial, there had been a huge battle over another building proposal, and the debate had been vocal, divisive, and bitter. For that reason, I knew that I would experience genuine opposition to my leadership for the first time. There were rough waters ahead, and if I as the leader didn't navigate us well, I could sink the ship. Charting the course with a navigation strategy. At that time I developed a strategy that I have used repeatedly in my leadership. I wrote it as an acrostic so that I would always be able to remember it, predetermine a course of action, lay out your goals, adjust your priorities, notify key personnel, allow time for acceptance, head into action, expect problems, always point to the successes, daily review your planning. That became my blueprint as I prepared to navigate for my people. Back then, I knew exactly what our course of action needed to be. If we were going to keep growing, we needed to build a new auditorium. I had looked at every possible alternative, and I knew that was our only viable solution. My goal was to design and build the facility, pay for it in 10 years, and unify all the people in the process. I also knew our biggest adjustment would come in the area of finances, since it would turn our current budget upside down. I started preparing for the congregational meeting. I scheduled it a couple of months ahead to give me time to get everything ready. The first thing I did was direct our board members and a group of key financial leaders to conduct a 20-year analysis of our growth and financial patterns. It covered the previous 10 years and projections for the next 10 years. Based on that, we determined the requirements of the facility. Then we formulated a 10-year budget that carefully explained how we would handle the financing. I also asked that all of the information we were gathering be put into a 20-page report that I intended to give to the members of the congregation. I knew that major barriers to successful planning are always fear of change, ignorance, uncertainty about the future, and lack of imagination. I was going to do everything I could to prevent those factors from hindering us. My next step was to notify the key leaders. I started with the ones who had the most influence, meeting with them individually and sometimes in small groups. Over the course of several weeks, I met with about 100 leaders. I cast the vision for them and fielded their questions. And when I could sense that a person was hesitant about the project, I planned to meet individually with him again. Then I allowed time for the rest of the people to be influenced by those leaders and for acceptance to develop among the congregation. When the time rolled around for the congregational meeting, we were ready to head into action. I took 2 hours to present the project to the people. I handed out my 20-page report with the floor plans, financial analysis, and budgets. I tried to answer every question the people would have before they had a chance to ask it. I also asked some of the most influential people in the congregation to speak. I had expected some opposition, but when I opened the floor for questions, I was shocked. There were only 2 questions. One person wanted to know about the placement of the building's water fountains, and the other asked about the number of restrooms. That was when I knew we had navigated the tricky waters successfully. When it was time for the motion asking everyone to vote, the church's most influential layperson made it. And I had arranged for the leader who had previously opposed building to second the motion. When the final count was tallied, 98% of the people had voted in favor. Once we had navigated through that phase, the rest of the project wasn't difficult. I continually kept the vision in front of the people by giving them good news reports to acknowledge our successes. And I periodically reviewed our plans and their results to make sure we were on track. The course had been charted. All we had to do was steer the ship. That was a wonderful learning experience for me. Above everything else, I found out that the secret to the law of navigation is preparation. When you over-prepare, you convey confidence and trust to the people. Lack of preparation has the opposite effect. You see, it's not the size of the project that determines its acceptance, support, and success. It's the size of the leader. That's why I say that anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Leaders who are good navigators are capable of taking their people just about anywhere.